So I think young people have a huge responsibility when it comes to policy development and implementation. And here are some of the key ways that young people can be involved actively in developing policies. We know all policies begin from the development of evidence and research. So young people can be involved actively in producing research and generating evidence to support the eventual policies. Because policies without evidence often don't go anywhere. So that is usually one of the first steps of really policy development where young people can be involved is through research. The other part where young people can be involved in policy work is through public participation and opinion taking.
Cancer, diabetes, obesity, hypertension, and asthma are all examples of non-communicable diseases, and sadly, these diseases are the leading cause of death globally. But do they really affect us here in Africa? And are Africans really living with these diseases? Find out here at the African NCD Champions Podcast as we share incredible stories of Africans living with non-communicable diseases. My name is Ogweno Stephen, and I'll be your host. Let's roll.
Hey, welcome again to the Africa NCDs Champions Podcast. Today we want to talk about policy in the context of NCDs. And in the previous conversations, we have discussed a lot around NCDs, looking at oral health, looking at the type of non-communicable diseases. But today, we want to take the conversation a notch and talk about policy in the context of NCDs. So the first question I think we want to discuss here is around really what are policies? And who better to take us through this discussion than Ogweno Stephen, who has been also involved in policy work with organizations, including the World Health Organization, the World Obesity. So, Steve, could you really help us demystify policies?
Yeah, so I'll take the most layman approach to defining and really to making sense of all of these big words. So in very simple terms, policies are laws that regulate, control, or manage certain instances or certain situations. So we are not talking about health policies. We are literally talking about health laws that have been passed by governments or approved by governments or international bodies. So this could be the UNs, the World Health Organizations, and the like, that affect individuals and help in controlling, managing, or regulating certain provisions in the health sector.
Okay, good. I think that sets the bar in terms of us talking about policies in the context of NCD. But I just want to add that while we might, think that NCDs are some, big or buzzword term, but it's really that set of ideas and plans that are put in place to address certain aspects of health and all that. And I think that is essentially what you are also referring to, really the things that, the plans that are there to address healthcare issues. Maybe the question that I want us to move into really is really the importance of having policies in the context of NCDs, and then we'll talk about some of the policies that are there that have been put in place to protect health and also achieve NCD health outcomes.
Yeah. So health policies are very, very important, and I think as I'll go with three key important points on why we need policies. So the first point is to ensure implementation. When there's a lot of health ideas and health programs and health suggestions and health good practices that cannot be implemented because they have not been converted into policy, or they do not have an anchoring policy for which forms the fundamental basis for their implementation. So one of the first reasons why we need policies is to ensure that they can actually be followed up by implementation, so that the plans that individuals, governments, organizations, institutions have curated can actually be implemented. The second thing is accountability. Policy helps us as advocates make the governments and governing bodies accountable to their promise or to their deliverables that have been speculated or have been talked about in the policies. So it acts as a point of reference for accountability's sake, to ensure that what has actually been talked about, what has actually been planned, actually goes on to be implemented according to the set guidelines that have been passed as policy. And then the third thing, in terms of the importance of policy, it helps set a base for fundraising efforts, but more than that, for implementation efforts. So tying back to the first piece, when these plans, these ideas, these best practices that we want in the health space have been anchored on a policy, it's much easier for government and implementing institutions like other NGOs to really follow up this and fundraise with the basis of the policy, because it's backed by law. It shows that it's an important issue that needs to be addressed, and often makes it much more easier to fundraise for that cause. So those are some of the key importances of policies, I'd say, from my end. And maybe I'll push this back to you if you have any other importances of policies before we move into the next part.
Okay, well, I think just coming from what you've said, policies also help in terms of achieving what we call the political goodwill, because most of the time these policies, policy pronunciation is mostly from the government, and it's the government that is mostly responsible for turning these policies into necessary regulations. So when government is actually involved in developing policies, and that helps also achieve political goodwill. I mean, we can give a case in point. The current universal health coverage policy that are being implemented. Look at the social health insurance. Look at what we call the facility fund, which is being implemented out of the health insurance. I mean, when these things are, policies being that they are the things that are developed by government, then we achieve a political goodwill and we are able to really implement them. I see you wanna.
Yeah, no.
Say something.
I was just about to move into the next question. If you finish that thought process.
Fine.
Yeah, and you're already getting into it, anyways. Which is, what are some of the policies? There are plenty. So, what are some of the emerging policies in the health space, and especially in the non-communicable disease space, that you feel that need to be highlighted for the priority areas that they're focusing in?
I mean, you're right by saying that there are very many. The plethora of policies and policy areas, so to speak. We can talk about policies around trans-fat elimination, which is work that is currently ongoing, and WHO was hoping by 2023 to have 2023 was the deadline for achieving or eliminating trans fats, and so they're pushing governments, though these were voluntary, for governments to enact necessary policies to be able to eliminate trans fat or integrate best practices around trans fats or limit it to 2 grams. But currently in Kenya, those policies are not really being enacted, and that's the work we are doing with the International Institute of Legislative Affairs to push governments, essentially across East Africa, to enact policies around trans fat to protect cardiovascular health or to achieve profound cardiovascular health outcomes. But policies also around alcohol. You've seen what is happening in Kenya, and recent highlights in the newspapers. Kenya has been termed as what we call the drinking nation, and we know how alcohol contributes to non-communicable diseases. So policies around bans on the number of hours or a bar can be open, limiting social media marketing that or aggressive marketing that is targeting young people or children, because right now companies, or let me say, let me just call them companies that are doing business in alcohol or whatever, or the alcohol industry is very, very powerful, and they push the agenda through everything that they're doing. Sponsoring events or sports and whatever, and really pushing the agenda around alcohol. So I think there should be policies around even sponsorship of events to discourage people from alcohol being available, because during these sports alcohol is there, and that's how they push their sales. So I think it's limiting, or policies around limiting sales, sale to young people or those who are under 18, and also to discourage early initiation into this thing. But I also talk about policies around tobacco reduction policies. Those ones have been put in place, and looking at the framework for tobacco control, which has been fronted by WHO, the famous FTCTC or FCTC, which is fronted by WHO. And I think we can also achieve that, and some quarters also from WHO are now pushing. And I saw this during the Global Alcohol Policy Conference in Cape Town, where we are talking about the possibility of us now coming up also with a framework convention on alcohol control, and policies emerge from having such framework. But it's also around policies around nutrition labeling to encourage people to make healthier choices. So there are, health has a lot of policies that sometimes when you start talking about, but looking at it in terms of policies around, those that will help us reduce the cases of non-communicable diseases. I think there are policies around alcohol, harm reduction. Of course, there are people who will be on my case for saying alcohol harm reduction, but just alcohol reduction, and also tobacco and limiting trans fats, nutrition labeling, policies around uptake on universal health coverage. Making sure that indigents are able to be covered in the universal health coverage. So maybe you can add some of the policies that you working with the World Obesity, which is a policy making organization. So you can also talk about some of the policies that you know.
Yeah, I think a lot of the important policies you sort of highlighted and spoken to, and I think only I'll just talk about the policy around the universal health coverage as another key policy that needs to be highlighted, especially when you're speaking to the context of NCDs, because current healthcare systems do not have comprehensive NCD plans. And so I think that's another key policy that needs to be covered. But more than that, I'd like to sort of take this conversation to a next step, which is really how can young people be really engaged and involved, especially in the policy making process, because we know that there's a lot of policies being suggested or being fronted, and some being sponsored by the very industries that we are working against. So it's really also looking at what is the role of young people in actually engaging in the policy processes. And I'll speak to a few pointers and then maybe bring you in as well, before we move into some more concluding remarks around this conversation on policy. So I think young people have a huge responsibility when it comes to policy development and implementation. And here are some of the key ways that young people can be involved actively in developing policies. We know all policies begin from the development of evidence and research. So young people can be involved actively in producing research and generating evidence to support the eventual policies. Because policies without evidence often don't go anywhere. So that is usually one of the first steps of really policy development where young people can be involved, is through research. The other part where young people can be involved in policy work is through public participation and opinion taking. Young people are often the ones who are going to be affected by these policies over the long term, and so a lot of effort needs to be put to ensure that young people are very, very actively engaged in public participation, that their opinions are heard, their perspectives are incorporated into the policy. Because despite the fact that the young people get to feel the impact of the policies the longest, they're also the ones who are more often than not neglected when it comes to the policy development process. So young people can be involved in meaningful public participation where their views are actually taken into consideration. The third thing is young people, especially people living with non-communicable diseases, can be involved as experts in the areas where these policies are developed. So for example, myself, who has lived with a couple of non-communicable diseases, I should be involved as an expert providing lived experience to this non-communicable disease and to providing a use case for it as well. So that, I think, is another very important role that young people need to be engaged in as experts, both in their lived experience and then also as experts in their technical experience. We have young people like us who are researchers, who are data analysts, who are scientists, who are innovators, who have written policy briefs. We can be involved along the policy process as experts, having equal voice with the more established authorities in the policy development process. And then finally, I think young people's role in the development of policy is also ensuring the implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of the policies themselves. Young people should not only be involved in the development and the passing of the policies, but also moving forward in the implementation of those policies, monitoring, and the evaluation, to ensure that then we are able to keep the policy implementers accountable for the work that they're doing. And so those are some of the key pointers that I think young people can be involved in when it comes to policies. And I don't know if you have any others to add on top before we move into more closing remarks on this on policy conversation.
Okay, very well. I think you've beautifully enumerated ways in which young people can be involved, but I would also add that the things that even the Constitution provides us with the right to also even peacefully demonstrate by carrying those placards and going out there and causing a storm. But peacefully. There's an area of concern, and the government needs actually to look into it. But participating also even amongst themselves, sensitizing themselves, or even creating awareness among themselves. Me and you, we might be privileged that we have this information. It's really not going to serve the purpose if we don't actually share with other young people. So we actually need to talk about these things so that we also mobilize other young people to get to know about this thing. Once they know about this thing, I think we can be able to participate meaningfully in policy making processes. But again, it's also about us really understanding what are the policy making processes, because most of the time we find that we want to we decry bad policies, but we don't actually follow the policy making processes. It comes from development of a bill, government develops a bill, and it comes to the first reading, goes to the second reading, it comes back now for public participation and gathering or whatever. And then you need to know really where is your expertise is needed, because yours is needed at the public participation stage. And if you wait until the public participation lapse, then it means public participation stage lapse, then it means then you can't be used for, you can just be used to rubber stamp the ideas, and then it's not going to really help. So my overarching message is that young people need to know how will be involved or they should be involved, they have to have the background knowledge, and they need to be grounded in the understanding of policy making processes, whether they are involved in budgeting for non-communicable diseases, whether they're involved in allocation of resources for these NCDs, or they're involved in maybe hiring of NCDs, healthcare workers. I think there's a need for a growing body of need to young people to really be grounded in understanding of policy making processes.
Yeah, so I think finally we are going to come to it's called a quick fire contribution when it comes to challenges that young people face along the policy making process and solutions that could be provided along the process. So we're going to keep this short and sweet, really enumerating those as we conclude the conversation. So what do you think are some of the challenges that young people are facing when it comes to actual policy work?
I think really this just goes back to what I've said, that while we have the energy, the altruism, we want to participate in this thing, if we lack the fundamental knowledge around policy making processes, that is a really, really big challenge that we have to surmount. So that is something that we need to work around or wrap our head around, so that we are able to deal with that lack of the knowledge that is required for us to effectively participate in policy making process. But I think also the challenge is how the youth are being framed by those policy makers. Maybe their contribution is just to rubber stamp, and I think that's one challenge, because you may find that young people are only getting involved just for them to tick a box, and not really as co-creators of these policies. So I think there should be a recalibration of the mind, and people need to understand that young people, because they are going to be the ones to really live with these policies, they need to be involved so that they know what is waiting for them. And so I think those are two challenges that I can talk about now, but I can also talk about issues to do with who is really going to support young people to be able to front their ideas up there, because again, it's also difficult to navigate the political process. Policy making process is politically led, or it has a lot of political angle in it. So how do you navigate the political landscape and be able to find yourself in the rooms where policies are being made? Are you going to, because it's you are participating in a lot of forums where policies are being made, and you know how hard it's to get there, and the things that you have to navigate to get in the rooms where policies are being made. So I think that is a challenge young people face: somebody to hold their hand, or a shoulder for them to stand on, to be able to also find themselves in those policy making forums.
Yeah, I think that is a good point. So I'll add one more, and then I'll talk about some of the solutions that could be adopted as we wrap up. I think the last challenge that young people also face is the challenge of free work. Young people are often involved in a lot of free work when it comes to policies. You engage, you review, you give your opinions for free. Young people need to be sustained. Young people need to pay rent, they need to eat, they need to move around. And so if we are only engaged in free work and not treated as equals in the policy making process, then it discourages a lot of young people and it kicks them out of the conversation. Solutions that could be made include the following. One is meaningful involvement of young people in these policy making processes, ensuring meaningful compensation, meaningful engagement, and also taking their opinions with equal weight with those other policy implementing or developing parties. And then secondly, there needs to be active engagement in training and in holding hands, which is mentorship of young people into the policy making processes. And with that, I think we'll see you on the next one.
Now that was incredible. Thank you for listening in. Share this with your networks and follow us on all social media at Storylink and at NCD Champions. See you on the next one.